The Battle of Kesselsdorf was fought on 15 December 1745, between the Kingdom of Prussia and the combined forces of the Archduchy of Austria and the Electorate of Saxony during the part of the War of the Austrian Succession known as the Second Silesian War. The Prussians were led by Leopold I, Prince of Anhalt-Dessau, while the Austrians and Saxons were led by Field Marshal Rutowski. The Prussians were victorious over the Royal Saxon Army and the Imperial Army of the Holy Roman Emperor. Preliminary maneuvers. 2 Prussian columns, one led by Frederick, the second by the Leopold the Old Dessauer, were converging on Dresden, the capital of Saxony, which was then an Austrian ally. Interposed between Leopold and Dresden was Rutowski with an army of Saxons, rapidly marching towards Dresden, and Rutowski was Prince Charles, who hoped to be able to reinforce both. Leopold moved slowly and deliberately forward, entering Saxon territory on 29 November and advanced on Rutowski at Leipzig, whereupon Rutowski retired towards Dresden. By 12 December, Leopold reached Meissen and joined with a corps under Lewald. Rutowski was reinforced by some Austrians under Gruner and took up a position at Kesselsdorf, 5 miles west of Dresden, that covered Dresden while leaving him closer to the advancing Charles than Leopold was to Frederick. The Saxons deployed along a ridge that ran from Kesselsdorf to the river Elbe and that was fronted by a stream and marshy ground. The 7,000 Austrians under Gruner formed on the right near the Elbe. The line was long and there was a considerable gap in its center between the Saxons and the Austrians. On the 15th, Leopold finally came up. There was much snow and ice on the field. Battle. The Prussians were slightly outnumbered 35,000 to 32,000. Additionally, the Saxons and Austrians had the advantage of the ground. Dessauer, a long-experienced general now over 70 years old, perceived that by taking the town of Kesselsdorf the enemy's flank could be turned and concentrated his efforts against the Saxon portion of the army. The Saxons had the town defended with 24 heavy cannon, their engineers and carpenters enhancing its defensibility. Leopold made dispositions for an attack by an elite force of infantry and grenadiers. However, the ground was very difficult and the first attack was repulsed with considerable loss, including the officer leading the attack, General Herzberg. A second, reinforced attack was made and this too failed, with the Prussians fleeing in disorder. The Prussians had suffered some 1,500 casualties from the attacking forces of 3,500. The Saxon grenadiers, seeing the flight of the Prussians, left their strong defensive position and made an impetuous pursuit of the Prussians, which exposed them to a massed charge by the dragoons of the Prussian cavalry. The shock of the charge sent the Saxons tumbling back and through their former position in Kesselsdorf, driving them from the field. At this same time, Leopold's son, Prince Moritz, personally led an infantry regiment which broke through the Saxon center. The regiment, although isolated, held its ground while other Prussian regiments attempted but failed to link up with it due to the stubbornness of the Saxon defense. Eventually, Leopold's success in taking Kesselsdorf bore fruit and the Saxon flank was turned, causing the Saxon line to collapse and their army to flee at nightfall. The Prussians' losses amounted to over 1,600 killed and more than 3,000 wounded, while the Saxon losses were less than 4,000 killed and wounded, with almost 7,000 Saxons taken prisoner as well as 48 cannon and 7 standards. During the battle, the Austrians on the right never fired a shot, while Charles, who had reached Dresden and could hear the cannon, failed to march to the aid of his ally. Aftermath. The Saxons fled in a wild panic into Dresden. There, despite the presence of Charles and his army of 18,000 and the Austrians' willingness to renew battle, they continued to flee. The Saxons then abandoned Dresden, which Frederick and Leopold occupied on the 18th after demanding its unconditional surrender. The Austrians subsequently began to negotiate the Peace of Dresden immediately, ultimately ending the Second Silesian War and leaving Prussia's ally, France, to conduct the rest of the War of the Austrian Succession alone.